Map game gangsters? We need to talk. If you're often wondering what's the best ship or plane or tank or the best division design in HOI4, watch this video until the end. I'm about to tackle the issue of why figuring out what's best or meta in Hearts of Iron 4 is really hard and might be even impossible, and why you should question what any YouTuber says on the subject, me included. I'll need to dive deep in some topics that are a bit more philosophical, but if you give me your attention for a few minutes, I promise you'll come out of this a much better player simply because your point of view might change. Now, what I'm about to say might be obvious to some of you, but I feel that most people can learn something here. So why am I saying that there's no such thing as best or meta in HOI4? To understand this, we need to take a look at what type of game we're playing. HOI4 is probably one of the most complex games on the market. We're not only talking about a strategy game, but a grand strategy game that tries to recreate the largest conflict in human history, World War II. Now, you can argue that there are some games such as War in the East 2 that feature more detail, but they're turn-based. And again, don't aim to tackle this war on a global scale the same way that HOI4 does. I don't think it's a point of contention that we're dealing with a complex game, so I'll move on to what this means for you as a player and how it relates to YouTube. I'm sure that all of you remember the first time you played HOI4. You likely picked a country and were greeted with a whole bunch of buttons and menu screens, and you didn't know how exactly everything worked. Some of you might have googled a bunch of stuff to get going, read something in an article or a forum, but most of you likely headed to YouTube as you could learn faster by just watching how a more experienced player plays and, more importantly, hear what they had to say. I remember when I was new to this, I used to watch videos to try and copy what exactly somebody else did on YouTube, and this was the way I learned the different mechanics in the game and, more importantly, how to exploit them so I can have an easier time beating the AI. However, as we advance as players, we naturally start asking questions that are more and more complex. For example, at first you might be wondering, how does the political screen work, how political power is generated, and how you can appoint ministers. But over time, this would evolve to questions like, what are the best ministers to get and when exactly should I get them to maximize their effectiveness? And you can extend this example to any area of the game: tanks, ships, planes, espionage, whatever. What I'm trying to say here is that YouTube is a great tool if you're a new player, as you can quickly learn the ropes and become an average or even a good player. But once you reach the point where you know how most of the game works and are looking for the best or meta design, things begin to get blurry, as the complexity of Hearts of Iron 4 doesn't really allow for a clear-cut, one-size-fits-all answer. Let's quickly go over the term meta. It's a very popular buzzword nowadays, and I feel that most people used best and meta interchangeably. However, these two words are not that close in meaning. If you Google it, you're gonna see what it means. Meta gaming is the player's belief as to what the most optimal way of playing is, and this is not necessarily an objective look at the most optimal way of playing. As far as I can tell, the word meta became really popular in games such as Dota 2 and League of Legends, where you have big pro players that get paid a lot of money to figure out what's the best way of playing the game. Even then, a patch or a discovery by another player might be so disruptive that the pro scene changes its style of play, and this in turn changes the meta. Aside from being a complex game, the problem with Hearts of Iron 4 is that we do not have a pro player scene that gets paid a lot of money to figure out the meta. And in the absence of pro players, you have YouTubers who look at you from a position of authority with their hundreds of thousands of subscribers to fill in the gap. You might have also learned how to play from this YouTuber, so there's also a relationship of trust there. However, YouTubers are not necessarily smarter or more knowledgeable than you once you've learned enough about HOI4. Let me repeat that. YouTubers are not necessarily smarter than you once you've learned enough about Hearts of Iron 4. Another thing to consider is that HOI4 was always a single-player game first and a multiplayer game second. Now, I won't argue that we do have an active multiplayer community and that there is 1 or 2 tournaments where people have played HOI4 competitively and for money. But even in these tournaments, they use mods to reduce the scale of the game to make it less time-consuming and less complex. Anyone who has played HOI4 multi will tell you that getting 10 to 25 people to stick around and play for hours on end and not quit when things go bad for their country is incredibly hard, which goes to show why this was not a game intended for multiplayer. Not to mention lag and all sorts of other connectivity issues which are typical for a game that lasts for several hours. If we accept the fact that we're playing a game that's designed for single player, that's incredibly complex, and in which things are not equal as each country has its own strengths and weaknesses, then we have to admit that there's no one-size-fits-all approach that can work for everyone, and that the word meta should not be something to look for. Of course, you might say, if that's the case, why have you used the word meta in your previous videos and titles, and doesn't that make you a liar? Which is a fair question. What I have to say is that we're all human, so it's natural for us to look for the best thing, whether that's the fastest car, the biggest TV, or the best fighter in HOI4. It's our instinct, it draws our attention, and at the end of the day, if you look at it from a viewpoint of a YouTuber, this is something that will get views on your videos. And that's the way she goes for every topic on YouTube, not only HOI4. As content creators, we're competing for your attention, and I feel that if I write a provocative title that will get me views, it will be fair for me to do so long as I provide something of value to you in the video and you don't remain disappointed. Of course, you might have another opinion on this topic, and that's alright, we don't have to agree on everything, but at the end of the day, it won't change how YouTube works. When I or any other YouTube mentions words like best or meta, take it with a grain of salt. While we do have the best intentions to provide you with accurate and useful information, we are humans, so we are prone to mistakes, and there's no way for us to know what country you're playing and what's your in-game situation. More importantly, people with a shit ton of experience in the game conduct tests and can't agree on what's the best approach to testing, as changing the way you test will change your results. I'll give you an example with a recent thread from the HOI4 Paradox forum about fighter plane tests on the latest patch, and here I want to give a shout out to WalterOlivos, Blahmaster6k, and Counterfactual Gaming, who were the most active in this discussion alongside me. If you want to subscribe to another OG Paradox guy who knows more about these games than 99% of the player base, Counterfactual Gaming is your man. Hopefully we can get him to stop playing the car crash that is Vicky 3 and start doing HOI4 content until Vicky is fixed. His channel is in the video description, so check it out if you feel like it. So back to the thread. It was about what was the best fighter model, and as we discovered, a lot of the people who have experience in the game actually had subtle differences in the way they conducted these tests, which led to different results. Specifically, the point of contention was what are the best weapons to put on the 1940 light fighter, more specifically whether going for quad heavy MGs on all 3 weapon slots is better compared to a build that substitutes one of these 2 quad heavy MGs with dual cannons 1. Here's how each of us tested this initially. I am not pointing this out to say what's wrong or what's right here, as all of these tests have limitations as they are a bit too neat and clean compared to a real game of Hearts of Iron 4. I'm just giving you an example of why figuring out what's best is hard, and why you should think for yourself and question anyone claiming to know the meta. So, Blahmaster started this thread and claimed that going dual cannons 1 on 2 of the 3 weapon slots and using quad heavy MGs on the 3rd one was the best thing you can do if you keep the single engine. And you do want to keep the single engine for IC efficiency reasons. The way he did his test was 2000 versus 2000 fighters, meaning that he didn't account for the fact that the fighter that only has heavy machine guns is cheaper than a fighter using dual cannons on 1 or 2 weapon slots. He didn't do that not because of a lapse of judgment, but rather because he believed that this is a more accurate way to conduct the test, considering that when you play HOI4, you rarely have a scenario where 2 countries or factions have the same amount of industrial capacity. Blahmaster also reinforced the planes he created, meaning that there wasn't a significant drop in numbers at no point during the test, and he concluded the test at some point in time with the air wings fully reinforced at all times. Then came WalterOlivos, and his opinion was that you should include a numerical superiority if one fighter is cheaper, which is something that I agree with as well. According to his testing with numerical superiority on one side, the fighter using only heavy MGs was the superior choice. Lastly, we had Counterfactual Gaming, who conducted his own tests, and he also claimed that the all heavy MG variant was the best. Finally, I also joined in and was sort of pissed off why nobody is testing quad heavy MGs on 2 weapon slots plus dual cannons 1 on the 3rd weapon slot. Because when I do these tests, I set a budget of let's say 100,000 IC and I don't reinforce my air wings. I just let them fight it out until one side wins out. According to my methodology, a fighter that uses dual cannons 1 on 1 slot and quad heavy MGs on the other 2 slots will beat the numerically superior all heavy MG fighter and the fighter with dual cannons 1 on 2 slots and quad heavy MGs, which will be numerically inferior because it's more expensive to produce. However, as I spoke about how I conduct these tests, the others advised me to reinforce my air wings, which is something that I thought about and still don't agree with completely, because you have a finite number of resources and factories in the world. At some point, you won't be able to reinforce as much as you lose, meaning that the model that I recommend will win out in the end. For example, when you put 4,000 versus 4,000 light fighters, both sides tend to lose north of 60 fighters per day, which is a number of losses that can't be reinforced for too long, even if you have reserves. I admit that if you fight for shorter periods of time, where the air wings are fully reinforced, the model I'm proposing might lose out on IC. So here you have to figure out what's more accurate, to fight for an arbitrary period of time, say 6 months, or fight with an arbitrary number of IC invested, and I feel that the 3 approaches that we've used can't really compare to a scenario where you actually play the game in real time, where a lot more variables are in play. This is something that the rest of the people I've mentioned in this video agree with as well, at least from my impressions. Now, I'm not doing the whole thread justice, so I've left the link if you want to check out the full thing. What I'm trying to raise as a point of discussion here is that our testing is limited, and while we can agree what separates a bad model from a good model in terms of fighters, we cannot agree which of the good models is actually the best model. And again, you can extend this example to all other areas of the game, be it tanks or aircraft carriers or whatever. So this is where you come in. As the player of a country that has unique bonuses and debuffs and resources and circumstances, you need to ask yourself, what is the best for me for the war I'm about to fight? Would a more expensive model with more cannons, doesn't take up much space in an airport, and does more damage per plane be something that I want to build, or should I go for numbers with the all heavy MG fighter, which would also save you some research if you don't have cannons researched? For example, you could see how a country like Germany would benefit from a more expensive fighter that features more cannons because it will be more fuel efficient, and usually when you deal more damage, this means that your air wings will be more experienced as well. And heck, if you're playing as the USA or Japan and the range is really becoming an issue as you try to project air power, you might throw light fighters out of the window and just go for heavy fighters. This is why there's no such thing as meta in Hearts of Iron 4. There are far too many variables, and it's up to you to consider where are you going to fight and what would you need to fight there with the utmost efficiency. So in this sense, the real meta in Hearts of Iron 4 is using your brain and thinking on the spot. YouTubers won't stop using buzzwords or clickbait to catch your attention, and that's alright as long as they don't disappoint you with what they have to say or show. So it's on you to think for yourself, question authority, and decide what's best in your situation. I guess you can call this my 1000 subscriber special, and thanks to everyone, to my current and future subscribers for supporting me. If you like such content, please leave a like, subscribe, and let's get a discussion going in the comments, because as I said, I cannot do this without you, and I value your opinion as well. I'll be happy to see what you think. Peace, and remember, think for yourself. This was only a small part of the air combat system of Hearts of Iron 4. If you want to learn everything about it and dominate the skies, the best guide on the internet is waiting for you right here. Watch it or Sally the Salamander gets it. It's a fake one. Don't worry, just watch the video.